It's July 5th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the IAEA's final verdict on Japan's Fukushima wastewater release. The chief of International Atomic Energy Agency has given his approval to the safety of the release plan, but it's unclear when the final call by Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida will be made due to strong opposition from Japanese fishermen and surrounding countries like China. South Korea's capital and central region were soaked with torrential downpours overnight. The monsoon rain will take a break today in those areas, with the return of sizzling hot temperatures in the afternoon. Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country is still united and developing steadily, despite the recent mutiny. Meanwhile, the Wagner Group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin insists the insurrection against the Kremlin was a march for justice. We start in Japan this morning. The IAEA has technically given the country the okay to release the Fukushima wastewater, saying the plan is safe. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae-eun-ji starts us off.
The UN nuclear agency, the IAEA, has released its final report on the safety of the discharge of Fukushima wastewater and gives Japan the green light to release the water into the Pacific Ocean. The comprehensive report said, following a 2-year review, the IAEA finds Japan's plans to be consistent with the international safety standards. The agency's chief, Rafael Grossi, who arrived in Japan on Tuesday morning, handed over a thick blue folder containing the report to the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida.
The plan, as it has been proposed and devised, is in conformity with the agreed international standards.
In a meeting with the IAEA chief, the Japanese leader stressed that he will not allow a discharge that would have a harmful impact on human health and the environment of Japan and other countries.
Japan will continue to provide explanations to the Japanese people and the international community in a sincere manner based on scientific evidence and with a high level of transparency.
IAEA's approval was something that was widely expected, as the agency has already been saying that samples of the wastewater from the Fukushima plant meet requirements. In its previous 6 reports, the agency said it found the measurement to be, quote, accurate and precise. During Grossi's 4-day visit to Japan, which ends Friday, he will also travel to the Fukushima Daiichi plant to inspect the site and visit an IAEA office there, which will newly open upon his visit. Grossi will then visit South Korea from Friday to Sunday to provide a detailed explanation of the report to the Korean government. He will sit down for talks with the country's foreign minister, Park Jin, and the chairperson of the Nuclear Safety and Security Commission, Yoo Guk-hee. But regardless of the IAEA's assessment confirming the safety of the water, South Korea will likely continue to ban imports of seafood from Fukushima. The Japanese government earlier said it plans to start releasing the wastewater into the ocean sometime this summer. Now that it has received the IAEA report, it will soon announce the exact schedule for the release, a process that will be carried out over the next 3 to 4 decades. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
And the South Korean government will announce its opinion of the IAEA's final report today. Ahead of the government statement, the country's lawmakers released mixed reactions to the report on Tuesday. Representing the ruling People Power Party, its senior spokesperson Kang Min-guk said that the party, along with the Yoon administration, will do their best to negate the worries of South Koreans and ensure their safety. In contrast, the main opposition Democratic Party concluded that the report is, quote, empty, adding that it does not show the results of the test or inspection results of the liquid processing system's performance sufficiently. The two parties are holding emergency meetings to discuss the issue this morning. But still, it's unclear when the disposal will be made, with remaining opposition, both within Japan and from overseas. Our Choi Soo-hyung reports.
As of now, the only remaining step for Japan's plan to release contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant is Prime Minister Kishida's decision to initiate the discharge. On Tuesday, the International Atomic Energy Agency concluded that Japan's plan to discharge contaminated water is in line with international standards. However, there are still concerns not only from neighboring countries but also from within Japan. Within Japan, local fishermen and politicians have raised concerns. On July 4th, Japanese broadcaster NHK reported that the Miyagi Prefecture Local Assembly unanimously adopted a statement opposing the discharge. Local fishermen also continue to oppose the plan. Following the IAEA's report released on July 4th, China held a special press conference. During the conference, China stated that the IAEA's report does not guarantee the legitimacy and legality of the discharge. China said that the IAEA is an organization that promotes the peaceful use of nuclear energy and is not suitable for assessing contaminated water. On the other hand, the United States supported the discharge decision, citing the scientific basis of the IAEA's report. A spokesperson for the U.S. Department of State said the report stated that it reflects the international consensus from all member countries. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Vice ministerial level talks took place in Beijing between South Korea and China against a backdrop of soured diplomatic ties. According to Seoul's Foreign Ministry, Deputy Foreign Minister Choi Young-sam on Tuesday held a meeting and a luncheon with Vice Foreign Minister Sun Wei-dong at the Chinese Foreign Ministry. The two discussed ways to develop stable relations and stressed better trade promotion, stable supply chain management, and efforts to expand person-to-person and cultural exchanges. The meeting was the first high-level talks between the two countries since comments made by China's ambassador to South Korea last month, which warned Seoul against making a wrong bet when it came to the China-U.S. rivalry. Torrential downpours that swamped the capital region overnight are taking a break today, bringing the summer heat back. But the central parts of the country are still seeing heavy rain. Our Lee Seung-ja has the latest.
Heavy rain warnings issued in Seoul and the metropolitan regions have been lifted as of 2 a.m. Wednesday as the rain clouds moved east. While Seoul and its surrounding areas seem to have avoided the worst of this season's monsoon rains so far, other regions could still be affected. Heavy rain warnings have been issued in Daejeon, Cheongju, and northern regions of Gyeongsang-Buk-do Province. Other regions that were issued the same warnings include Jeollabuk-do Province. Heavy rainfall of 10 to 30 millimeters per hour can be expected in the affected regions. While no casualties have been reported overnight, the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters said Wednesday that there was some damage caused in the Seoul metropolitan region. This includes 7 homes and stores that were flooded due to the heavy overnight rain, with some trees also reportedly damaged. 423 households in Gyeonggi-do Province lost power late Tuesday night. Currently, access is restricted to 414 trails in 14 national parks, including Bukhansan, Wudungsan, and Jirisan. Heavy rain is expected in different parts of the country throughout Wednesday, with southern regions of the country expected to see 20 to 60 millimeters of rain. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, this year's monsoon season should be similar to previous years and is expected to last for a total of 32 days. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
South Korea's finance ministry has cut the country's economic growth projection. To revitalize the country's economic vitality, a new economic policy direction for the latter half of the year was unveiled on Tuesday. Our economic correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
As price hikes in South Korea continue to ease, the government has slashed its inflation outlook for the year from 3.5% to 3.3%. However, it has also lowered its growth projection for 2023 to 1.4% due to a sluggish performance in the first half. Despite this cut in its economic forecast, the government expects the economy to gradually recover in the second half of the year and more substantially starting next year. Mentioning this, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho announced on Tuesday the economic policy direction for the latter half aimed at improving the country's economic vitality.
The country's economic conditions have been gradually improving, but economic uncertainties still remain in the global economy and financial markets. In the second half of the year, the government will focus on enhancing economic vitality, stabilizing people's livelihoods, improving the economic structure and future preparation.
First, the government will focus on boosting sluggish exports, as these will play a significant role in the country's overall economic rebound. It'll do so by injecting record-breaking trade financing of 184 trillion Korean won, or roughly $140 billion during the second half. The government also aims to stimulate domestic consumption by boosting tourism. To encourage off-season travel, 300,000 vouchers worth $23 each for accommodation will be distributed in November. To attract more foreign tourists, 700 free round-trip flight tickets will be given out in July and August, targeting visitors from countries such as Japan, Taiwan, and China. As for improving the country's economic structure, it will focus on fostering science and technology as well as cutting-edge industries and expand joint research at the global level. The government aims to promote this and nurture key personnel by partnering local research institutions with ones in the U.S. Additionally, it is planning to expand its R&D and technological cooperation with the EU by having further talks on Seoul joining the EU's Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Program. South Korea could also soon expand tax benefits for video content makers to the same level as those for chip makers. Currently, the tax credit for conglomerates making video content is 3%, while for small and mid-sized businesses, it stands at 10%. The revised tax credit for video content makers is yet to be announced, but tax benefits for chip makers have been raised to a maximum of 25%. 신하영, Arirang News.
Ice cream is a perfect snack all year round, but especially during the summertime. It's long been considered an affordable treat, but not so much these days. Why? For more, we're joined by Professor Kim Se-wan this morning. Welcome back to the program.
Good morning.
The price of ice cream has risen over 20% over the past 2 years. Professor, what's behind the dramatic jump?
Personally, I'm such an ice cream lover, so I can see that ice cream price increase in a large scale in the last 2 years. Manufacturers, which are mostly large firms, point to increasing raw material cost and as a driving force behind their decision to raise wholesale prices. Supermarkets and other distribution channels already implemented price hikes back in February. And convenience stores are gradually adopting the increased prices in a sequential manner. But it should be noted that the raw materials like sugar, flour, and milks, international prices are dropping quickly from last year. In addition to last 2 years' rise, convenience stores are raising prices for ice cream by double digits starting next month following consecutive increases in wholesale prices.
Right, rising by double digits, that's a huge jump.
Right.
But the thing is, Professor, it's not just ice cream. It's ramen, snack foods, bread, and even pastries. Now, the government rolled up its sleeves to tame those prices as well. Now, is there a possibility that the government will do the same to ice cream? I mean, if they do, will that pressure work on them?
Well, we have a different situation for ramen compared to the ice cream. We know that ramen became almost daily necessary to many Koreans, particularly to low-income people, while ice cream did not. So government does not see that ice cream and coffee and pastry and breads are as important as ramen to Koreans. It means that Korean government is not likely to impose a pressure to stabilize ice cream price. But ice cream is still one of the 490 items in the CPI basket, which is a basis for calculating inflation. So if ice cream price increases more than, say, 50%, there is a possibility for Korean government to intervene the ice cream market to stabilize overall inflation.
Right. I guess ramen is more considered as a meal over ice cream, right?
Right.
Right. Then, as I mentioned earlier, ramen prices have gone down, like you've mentioned as well. For instance, one of the much beloved ramen products, Shin Ramen, both at home and abroad, had its price lowered for the first time in 13 years. Now, how much of an economic effect can we actually feel it as consumers then?
Price of ramen gives more impacts on general consumer price index than any other food item. Therefore, lower ramen price is a good news to stabilize inflation further. Actually, ramen is one of the 490 items in calculating general consumer price index, but it has more power in calculating price level because ramen sale is larger than any other food items in the CPI basket. So in the whole economy level, lower ramen price provides stronger momentum to stabilize inflation along with declining oil prices and agricultural products prices.
Right. Actually, yesterday, I remember exports of ramen came to a new record high for the month of June, I remember. So exports are also going up, and also the amount of ramen that we consume here in the country are also on the rise. So maybe that's affecting the price.
Right.
Then let's talk about the inflation overall. The country's inflation last month hit the 2% range for the first time in 21 months. That's largely driven by oil prices falling to a new record. Should we see this as an inflation relief? What do you think? I mean, what's your outlook on the nation's inflation in the second half of the year now that we've entered July?
It is true that domestic inflation is quickly cooling down to 2% level or near after the peak of 6.3% in July last year. And this level of inflation, which is 2% level, is already very close to Bank of Korea's target inflation rate of 2%. But it is expected that inflation will stay around 2% level without fast decrease by the end of this year. In June, inflation eased for the 5 consecutive months to the lowest in 21 months is at 2.7% on year. But the core inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, rose 4.1% on year, which is higher than previous month, 3.9%. This is a major signal that inflation does not quickly decrease in the near future. And the inflation outlook is still highly uncertain because the risks from global oil prices, economic growth, and public utility price increases.
Right. All that because of those global variables remaining underneath. Now, before we let you go, Professor Kim, the country has lowered the country's economic growth outlook to 1.4%, right? Now, were you surprised? Right. And do you think this is a doable goal?
Well, as of now, it is something like a doable goal because for the last half year, 6 months, Bank of Korea and KDI, which is the major think tank of Korean government, has been lowered the forecast of this year's Korean economic growth from 1.9% to below 1.5% level. That means overall this year is not as good as last year in Korean economy. However, as export picks up from last month, it is pretty possible to achieve 1.4% economic growth by the end of this year.
Sure, and let's also see how the country's new economic policy direction will play out for the second half of the year, including boosting exports and also tourism that we can much expect from all the pandemic years.
Right.
All right, Professor Kim Se-hwan, thank you so much for your insight, as always.
Thank you very much.
Let's look at what's going on in the world now. Russian President Vladimir Putin says that the Russian people are united as never before and that the country is developing steadily. He made the remarks on Tuesday during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. Attending the summit virtually, Putin addressed other leaders from China, India, Pakistan, Iran, and 4 Central Asian countries. He said Russia will resist pressures imposed on it by what he called illegitimate sanctions and the hybrid war in Ukraine. It marked his first international appearance since an armed mutiny by the Wagner mercenary group threatened Moscow only 10 days earlier. The mutiny ended after Wagner group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin made a deal with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Prigozhin has since made his first remarks after arriving in Belarus last week. He uploaded a 41-second voice message on Telegram on Monday local time where he thanked supporters of the failed uprising. He added that the so-called March for Justice was mainly aimed at fighting traitors and mobilizing our society. In the United States, just ahead of the 4th of July celebrations on Tuesday, a series of mass shootings have left at least 10 people dead. On late Monday evening, 3 people were killed and 8 wounded after a local festival in Fort Worth, Texas. Just a few hours earlier, 5 people were killed and 2 were injured in Philadelphia when a gunman wearing a bulletproof vest opened fire on strangers. That came a day after 2 people were shot dead and 28 were injured at a street party in Baltimore. Motives of all 3 shootings are still unclear. U.S. President Joe Biden has condemned the shootings and called for tighter gun laws. So far this year, the U.S. has seen over 340 incidents of mass shootings and gun violence. Also in the U.S., 4th of July hot dog eating contest champion Joey Chestnut has kept his title. The 39-year-old has successfully beat back his challengers on Tuesday at New York City's Coney Island, making it his 16th career win. Chestnut ate 62 hot dogs in just 10 minutes. He was way ahead of runner-up Jeff Asper, who managed just 49 hot dogs. Despite the win, Chestnut failed to beating his world record, 76 hot dogs set in 2021. The day also saw Miki Sudo win the women's version of the competition for the 9th time. She ate 39.5 hot dogs in 10 minutes. 이영은 아리랑 뉴스.
Good morning. There were heavy showers across Korea overnight, especially in parts of Gangwon-do province, including Cheollon and Chuncheon, were soaked by the massive rainfall. And until this morning, the south coast of Gyeongsang-Namdo province and Jeju Island could see 30 millimeters an hour of heavy rain pounding down, with a heavy rain advisory issued on Jeju. So the island could see up to 30 millimeters of rainfall. The rest of the east can expect lingering rain through the morning. Then sunnier and quieter condition is set to make a return this afternoon. Top temperatures in Seoul will be similar to yesterday, topping out at 29 degrees Celsius. Daegu will be much hotter at 32, along with very high UV rays nationwide. So sun protection items are a must by the time you head out for lunch. Also brace for strong winds today. Monsoon rain takes a break for a couple of days and returns at the end of the week to southern parts of the country, while temperatures remain on the hotter side. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Stay safe wherever you are.
하나, 둘, 셋. sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.
먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
웰컴.
엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
웰컴.
엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
We're here to make a new type of news. New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's July 5th here in Seoul. I'm Shin, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Nat'l Assembly. Good morning. Good morning, and Park Ki-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news stories that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Now, our first story has to do with how many luxury cars worth over $230,000 US are in Korea. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport on Tuesday said there's 6,299 such cars in the country. These cars include Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Ferraris, and Lamborghinis. We've been seeing more demand for luxury cars compared to 2016, when there were only 199 of them, worth over $230,000. And we're seeing a lot of bugs here in Korea, especially mosquitoes, now that the weather has gotten a lot hotter. But you may want to think twice before lighting your mosquito repellents, because a common substance used might have some problems. It's called electrin and is used in many insecticides around the world. But this March, the European Chemicals Agency stopped this substance from being used, citing safety concerns. That's why the Environment Ministry in Korea is also re-examining electrin and will make its final decision within this year. And the famous U.S. burger chain Five Guys has opened its first Korean branch in Gangnam-gu district in Seoul. A week into its launch, over 15,000 burgers were sold. That means around 2,000 burgers were sold on average per day. And to give you a bit more detail on how well the Korean branch is doing, Five Guys Gangnam has garnered the most sales in the first week out of all Asian Pacific branches. Also in the same period, from June 26th to July 2nd, it made it into the top 5 restaurants in terms of sales among all Five Guys branches around the world. So Korea seems to be a hotbed for foreign food branches, and we've seen a similar buzz last time with another U.S. burger chain, Shake Shack. And Ki-hoon, were you a part of this latest craze? Did you go to Five Guys yourself here in Gangnam?
Of course not. Unfortunately, not yet. But funny enough, yesterday I actually had a Shake Shack burger delivered. And funny enough, you don't see many people lining up in front of these burger joints anymore. Right. But anyway, with Five Guys, I did see some clips of people uploading how they were lining up for the open run, and it's great to see that. I even saw I read an article where people from Japan flew over just to taste this. It was an expensive burger for them, but just to try it out. So that's pretty hot here in Korea. But I'd like to see more Korean-made burger joints do better in the domestic market. However, one upside to saving the time of lining up is in the long queue is a release of a restaurant reservation app.
Ooh, I love those.
You can do it online, and as long as you're in the restaurant within the 30 minutes of the alarm, you can just go in without just physically lining up. So hopefully with me, when the heat cools down a bit, I will probably try out the burger one day.
I think it's worth not now.
Not
because
now.
I remember in one of our earlier episodes, you said you hated waiting in line.
I don't understand. I mean, for some people, it could be the whole experience, like uploading on SNS. But with me, time is money.
Time is money, and that's why he recommended a virtual reservation that was made in line online. But what do you think, Nat'l, about the latest craze, especially for foreign restaurants? Once they, for instance, if they're from the United States and they come into Seoul, people stand in long, long lines.
Very long lines.
Sell these burgers for staggering prices. Do you? But most of the times, I don't know about you, but they don't meet my expectations. What about you?
I mean, they're great restaurants. I love them personally, but I think social media hypes it up a lot more than it should.
Yeah.
And so by the time you get there and you take all the pictures, you've waited in line for I don't know how many hours, it's not as good. And I think you guys mentioned Shake Shack when it first came into Korea. It was during summer. I think it was 3-4 hours of lining up in Gangnam, and it's a narrow alleyway where you line up. So I was just like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna wait it out a few months, and I'm glad that these chains are coming into Korea, that we can experience them even in Korea without having to go to the States. Chick-fil-A, please come to Korea. But I say just wait a few months, and then it'll be
worth the same amount as your expectation.
Yeah, because you mentioned Shake Shack and Ki-hoon had it delivered to his house yesterday.
Yeah.
But before, like months back, you couldn't even imagine that.
Right.
Years back, actually, you would have to wait in line. And that was our news feed for this Wednesday. Let's now move on to our discussion topic. We're going to be talking about how South Koreans ask the main question, will you marry me? Take a look at the screen to find out how they ask. Flowers, fancy hotel suite, a new designer handbag, and of course, a diamond ring. This seems to be the bare minimum, or what you obviously need to prepare before proposing in Korea. It seems to be the perfect equation to the perfect proposal. Today, NewsGen aims to find out if our generation really has such a thing for marriage proposals by answering 3 questions. 1. What does our generation think is the perfect proposal? 2. Is it true that most people in our generation who decide to get married spend thousands for that one night? 3. How is South Korea's proposal culture different from other countries? Marriage is no longer the norm or no longer considered completely necessary by our generation. But for those looking to get married, one thing that does seem expected is a perfect proposal. A few weeks back, the Wall Street Journal reported on how South Koreans spend thousands of dollars just to pop the question. The report also listed how there seems to be an equation to a good proposal, and that's flowers, a hotel suite, and a designer bag. Now, Nell, why don't you tell us more on what this foreign press had to say on South Korea's proposal culture?
And as you know, Korea has one of the lowest birth rates of all OECD nations, and pretty much Wall Street Journal basically counted expectations of proposals as another obstacle towards marriage, and I guess leading to low birth rate. But they mentioned this specific one office worker with the name Oh Hae-rim, and she's 29 years old, a regular MZ like us, and she recently got engaged with the whole package of designer bag and a fancy hotel. And the article reported that it's quite common for people to expect this, and they wanted to all show off on social media the kind of luxury proposal that they received. So it kind of came across as how Koreans are expecting this luxury proposal.
But do you agree with that statement?
You know, personally, no. And yeah, while definitely there are people who have these standards, and I've seen on social media, actually there's around 40,000 hashtags, posts relating to hashtag hotel proposal, and there are hotel proposal packages, I think around $1,200 US, and these get reserved 38 times per month. So it's there, but I would say this is still not the majority. Perhaps everybody's raising their expectations because they see it on social media, but the truth is majority cannot afford this, and a lot of people are more reasonable. And I don't think the problem is with the designer bags and the hotel itself. The issue is that everybody wants to have the exact same proposal, and the creativity and the intimacy that's required to make a proposal kind of special for the two people is now starting to get measured by the amount of money spent. And when you start comparing proposals with the amount of money spent, you know, how sad is that?
For sure. And you know what? I think it also has to do with the fear of missing out, FOMO,
That's right, FOMO.
Because everyone uploads their personal life on social media, even their proposals, they start to compare it with each other.
Exactly.
But you mentioned a really good point, is that the majority can't afford it. It's just a very minority of people that can afford these luxury proposals. And Ki, would you like to add on to whether you agree with the Wall Street Journal's statement that South Koreans seem to be all wanting these luxurious proposals?
You know, in some sense, it could be true and be seen as a trend from overseas because it's becoming so viral on social media. And, you know, I mean, I fully understand the whole SNS platform, but that's not the truth. That's not true for all cases. And one thing I do agree is the gap between the rich and the poor has definitely increased during the pandemic. So maybe this kind of behavior is more common among like the upper class people, but not the majority. And there's also the notion of peer pressure, where, you know, more millennials and Gen Zs, I guess they're more sensitive to how they are viewed by their friends, especially online, where it's another reality and community. So whatever they upload, you know, and what they do, who they are, can be, you know, all categorized as like where they stand in the social hierarchy. But of course, you know, marriage, like you would know now, is a once in a lifetime moment. And I think all women, I do understand, they want it to be very special.
Of course.
And of course the men, they have to flex
Yeah.
a little. I mean, like, you know, using a lot of money to show that, you know, they really want to tie the knot with their significant other.
Right.
But for me personally, I think going through financial burden just for a marriage proposal isn't the right direction to go, because just imagine how much more burden you have to go through the marriage life.
All
Right.
Then why don't we sort of share a bit more scoops of reality by explaining first, Nell, how you received your proposal. What was it like? Tell us how you got the ring.
Please tell the whole world.
Okay, so as you guys know, I have been married for 3 years, and I got proposed to when we visited my husband's parents in Seattle, and it was at this beautiful park at sunset, and we were taking pictures, and his sister was taking pictures for us and saying, oh yeah, do this kind of pose, do this kind of pose, and my husband said, for the next one, why don't we pose like I'm proposing to you? And I said no.
Oh,
I was
really?
like, no, that's so lame. I'm not gonna do that.
Wait, did you know that it was going to be a proposal?
No, I didn't know. I was like, why would we do that? That's so weird. And this obviously threw him off, but he's like, no, just
do it.
Just do it.
Please.
Because I'm actually proposing. And then he took out this ring box, opened it, and the ring was hanging upside down from the top of the lid, which was so very in character. Honestly, there were a lot of mistakes, and it wasn't perfect, but I just felt like that was so him. It was very genuine, and it was heartfelt, and so I was like, that's sweet.
That is such a sweet
And
proposal.
it wasn't expensive. It was outdoors. There was a ring. Yes, there was a ring, but like, you know, it was just how he did it from the heart.
It wasn't like a luxurious hotel suite with a designer bag, but I think that's more heartfelt.
It's cute.
It's genuine, and I love the goofy little mistakes he made.
Yes, it wasn't on purpose, I assure you.
That's really nice. And why don't you share how people around you then, because I know you're not married yet. So, not yet. But how did your friends propose to their significant others?
You know, I actually asked 4 of my millennial friends who are married and how they actually proposed, and here are the answers that I got. One was at a beach.
Okay.
Second one said in a small studio apartment. Third one, it was at home with balloons, wedding shoes, handwritten letter with, you know, like recorded video playing in the background. And last but not least, no proposal.
No proposal at all?
And he got married. So apparently, perhaps maybe the wife wanted to get married a little more than the guy.
Maybe he got proposed to, he didn't tell you.
Perhaps, who knows? No one knows. So I just want to say that everyone's different. And since we're talking about how much money is being spent on marriage proposal, I'd like to share a visual to show what single men and women in their 20s and 30s think the appropriate spending on marriage proposal is. So let's take a look at the screen.
All right.
We can see that more than 50% think spending less than $750 is reasonable, while only around 20% are willing to spend up to $1,000. So clearly we can say spending extravagant amounts of money is not necessarily a trend happening in Korea. And on the contrary, I'd like to say, you know, more millennials and Gen Zs are practicing different ways, new ways of saving up, and even doing challenges of not spending any money for one full day and entering group chats where they share their spending pattern and receive advice from others who also try to live on a tight budget.
I think we mentioned this during our rehearsal today, that we're seeing such a polarization of consumption patterns, because on one episode we mentioned how a lot of millennials and Gen Z love spending on luxury goods, but then we have this kato room, which you mentioned, where they don't spend any money at all, and they would sort of scorn each other. They would scold each other for spending like money on water.
I bought a bottle of water. Like, why? You can drink free water from the tap.
Go to your company and then go drink from the water fountain, stuff like that. So it's very interesting to see there's a polarization there. And we're now going to add another millennial in our talks to hear how he proposed, and we'll include him right after this. Let's hear from another global millennial on what he has to say on today's topic. He's Garrett Eder, who's recently gotten engaged. Welcome, Garrett.
Hello.
Woo! Thank you so much for having me.
Congrats.
Now, Garrett, tell us a little bit about yourself. I hear you've gotten engaged. Congratulations. Tell us who popped the question first and how you remember your proposal night.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm Garrett. I'm just studying English education at Korea University. And of course, I pop the question. Usually it's, common for the guy to pop the question. Wow, I have so many memories from the proposal night. It was kind of crazy. It was on my birthday, which was kind of insane.
Oh, that's so meaningful.
And we went to a trampoline park. And I actually had made a video the night before of lots of pictures of us and picked out some songs. And then she didn't know about any of this. I had flowers. I came in kind of jumping on the trampoline with flowers. And then they helped us control the kids, because I actually almost backed out of the proposal that day. I was so scared because there's so many kids there compared to what I thought. But they encouraged me to do it, and just in case she didn't like the super public proposal, I also planned a dinner by the Han River together too, just for a little bit of romantic piece to it, just in case. But it was too crazy.
You were really prepared. You had a plan B. Thought this through. It's truly nice.
Yeah,
okay, I have
really
a question.
wanted her to like it.
Do you think that South Koreans have this set equation for a perfect proposal? Have you seen this trend as you've been living in Korea?
I haven't necessarily seen the trend, but I have talked to a couple people, and I have heard about the handbags and things like that. And to be honest, I think it could be okay if they, girls don't want jewelry and they want a handbag. That's
instead of a ring.
Personal opinion. Yeah, right. Maybe instead of a ring.
I see.
But I've heard of other stories like where the girl proposes or things like that. So I've heard of various ideas. And ways.
Yeah.
All right, okay, Garrett, compared to that of the States, what is South Korea's proposal culture like? And did you try to incorporate some traits into your own proposal?
Right, so what I've heard from Korea's proposal culture is they decide about the marriage before, like we're both going to get married, and then they kind of set the whole wedding up, and then maybe propose a month or 2 months before the wedding, which is very different than from America. I don't know if I tried to necessarily incorporate something very Korean into my proposal, because my fiance, she also lived in the Philippines for about 8 or 9 years, so she doesn't have like all the expectations maybe of a regular Korean girl, I would say. But yeah, she's very open, and also to American culture too.
I see.
All right, Garrett, let me ask you the last question. It's very fascinating to hear that you had a plan B. You were also a little worried that there were so many children in the trampoline park. So it seems that you have experience as to planning out a really perfect and really nice proposal. So could you give us a few tips? I haven't been proposed to, or I haven't given a proposal out yet. So what should I remember when receiving or giving out a proposal?
I think of course, like Nat'l said, you have to do it from your heart. And if both people know that the other person is committed to like a long-term love that's going to last for years and years, I think then you shouldn't worry as much, and you just try to express your heart as much as you can. Of course, considering the other person's expectations and who they are, because each person's different in what they want. So I would say to think about that and try to be, of course, Americans might try to be more unique. Like my cousin, he proposed coming out of the water because he was doing because he was had the gear on to go underwater. He was taking classes to do that, and he came out of the water and like put the ring on her. So
wow,
that's really so creative. Okay, so creativity and sincerity. I'll remember those two words if I eventually do propose. Okay. All right, thank you so much, Garrett.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yay.
Yay.
Bye-bye.
All right, and before we continue our talks, we're also going to hear what our global viewers had to say on today's topic. Take a look at the screen to find out what 3 of them had to say. Christina Domenico said proposal culture in my island nation Fiji is after the age of 25. The couple will have to tell their families they're in a relationship, and the guy asks the girl's family for her hand in marriage. The guy's family will give traditional gifts as it's customary, and the engagement ring as well. Tiers Bell says it varies from relationship to relationship, but the norm for proposing is usually after 1 to 5 years. Sometimes it's private, but most of the time it's done in a public setting, like with friends and family. Usually, the man gets down on one knee and pulls out a ring and proposes. Benny says proposal culture in the Philippines is maybe to set it up in a restaurant or in a private resort. A lot of it is planned ahead, depending on how long they've been thinking of marriage. So there's a lot of similarities to how the proposal culture is like here in Korea. And before we end off then, I would like to ask you guys how you think South Korea's proposal culture may differ with other countries.
I think Garrett really mentioned it. But I think first and foremost, in the West, when it's a proposal, the meaning of proposal means you're suggesting that you do something. So it's a question. Would you like to marry me? Will you marry me? And you can actually say no. I mean, I'm sure some girls say no here in Korea as well, but it's a little, I feel like there's a little more uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's really a question with a heavy question that can be yes or no. And usually it's a surprise, and the parents usually find out afterwards. But in Korea, like Garrett mentioned, you have both sides of the parents come together. They have this thing called 상견례 and talk about the wedding date, and they maybe have already the wedding hall booked, and they picked out all the wedding rings, and then they propose. So I think it really is more of an event and kind of a gesture to show your future wife that, oh, I would really, really like to marry you.
I think that's why a lot of people think of it as an event, because it's just one of the many steps you take before the wedding day. And I remember my friends, when they come to me with their little invitations, they're like, hey, I'm getting married. And I ask them, did you get your proposal? And they're like, no, my husband-to-be will propose like a day before the wedding or something.
Okay.
So I thought that was a little different from how it's done in the States. Would you care to add on?
Yeah, well, I mean, once the proposal is done, you have the wedding, right? So I'd like to talk a bit about the wedding culture. Like here in Korea, it seems very formally conducted. It's almost done in the exact same manner. So when you go to wedding convention buildings, it's almost like a factory that's performing the same routine over and over throughout the whole day. Whereas in the country, overseas, like to weddings that I've been to, it's a bit more, I guess, casual, relaxed, and a bit more customized to fit the needs of the newlyweds, like how they wanted to plan it out. It's a bit more, you know, I guess it's not as strict and formalized. So I think that's the biggest difference. And the people who actually attend those kind of weddings overseas, they're generally happy and they just want to congratulate the happy moment. Whereas kind of in Korea, it's like, I think we talked about this before, how they pay the congratulatory.
It's your duty.
Yeah, it's like a duty because
money envelopes.
You have to receive it later on when you get married. So I think in that sense, it's very different.
There's a big difference there. And before I ask you guys the last question, which is which direction shall we go in terms of proposal culture, I would like to ask you, Ki-hoon, you haven't been proposed to yet, or you haven't given out your proposal. So what is your dream perfect proposal like?
I mean, if I were to receive a proposal, I mean, we talked about this in the news feed. I would definitely love a Lamborghini, a Bentley, or a Rolls Royce with a pink ribbon. Actually, no.
Pink ribbon.
Actually, I'm just joking. The real proposal, if I did get a proposal and did get married, I would just want to have a very small wedding, private wedding, just with my family members. That's about it.
Intimate.
No friends.
No friends.
Only family.
I don't want to make it public. Just want to keep it low-key, quiet, just among the people that I really, truly love and who are the most important to me. That's the kind of wedding I want. And I don't really want a proposal. If I choose to marry someone, is there a need for a proposal? Yeah, we just go ahead, you know?
Just kind of
I don't even feel the need of having a wedding.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like, you want to...
This calls for another
This calls for a completely different
because, I mean, think about all the money involved, the burden, especially on the male side, like in Korea. So I don't want to feel that kind of burden just like before marriage.
It's very interesting to see the practical side. I think you're speaking on behalf of many practical millennials out there. Now, very briefly though, where shall our proposal culture go then?
Yeah, you know, I think we've been mentioning all throughout the day that, you know, proposals and even weddings are a little bit overrated, like Ki-hoon was mentioning. It is a big step, but these are pretty small compared to the marriage that you're going to have for the entire life. And so I really think today's key is that you do things from your heart, and as long as you're genuine and, you know, wanting to make the other person feel special, that should be enough.
And you mentioned a very, very good point. It's what happens after the wedding day.
Right, it's a marriage.
It's a marriage. And that's all we have for you today. We'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Nat'l Song. Thank you. And Park Ki-hoon.
It was a pleasure.
All right, thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say.